planujesz, tak w sumie się podpytam od razu, jak mam okazję, to będzie bardziej tak w formie webinaru, czy jakieś tam przedstawienie teorii, trochę pytań, czy będzie jakiś tam...
Znaczy ja tego nie prowadzę, to prowadzi Dawid, nie?
A, jasne.
Z tego co wiem, to no, mniej warsztatowo to będzie raczej, ale będzie Q&A czy coś, nie?
Fajnie. Jestem mega podjarany, że będzie można posłuchać twórcy metody.
Czekaj, bo mam pogłos z ciebie. Okazuje się, że ten live streaming to jest taki live z opóźnieniem kilkusekundowym.
Okej. No ja tak czy siak też coś tam sobie muszę przekąsić do tej 18.
Jasne. Jakby co, to ja tutaj jestem.
Wyłączę na chwilę, ale fajnie, że tego, super. To
No
będzie...
też się cieszę. Nie? Przed chwilą pisał mi David, że będzie, więc nie powinno się nic już nieprzyjemnego stać, bo wiesz, no stresowałem się, że wiesz, że zapomni, nie pojawi się, czy coś, nie wiem, mój internet zerwie.
No
Napisał
jasne,
mi maila i mi dał backup z tymi, ze slajdami, jakby jego się popsuły, nie?
jasne. Fajnie, dobra. To na chwilę uciekam i wrócę na tego. Świetnie.
Hello, Barry. Nice to see you. I can't hear you. You're muted. So much better.
How are you?
I'm great. And where are you from?
On another call. I just wanted to make sure I got in because I know there's a lot of people on the call today.
Okay, so hopefully they will appear.
Yeah,
So you are the third person that is, let's say, half hour before. So yeah, where are you from, Barry?
I am. Hold on one second, please. I am in New Jersey, in the U.S.
Oh, okay. So you are a foreign guest for us. That's for sure. So
Look, I participated in something in Germany last week, so why not?
yeah, so we are really happy that you are with us.
Thank you for including me. I appreciate it.
That's the benefit. That's the benefit of this situation, COVID, that almost all meetups are online now.
Yeah, around the world, you can participate in everything you want.
Yeah.
Everywhere.
In Amsterdam, of course, virtually. So that's the nice add-on of that COVID, if I may say so.
Everyone.
I'm going to go on mute for a little bit. Forgive me.
No problem.
Cześć, witaj.
No cześć. O, jesteś czwartą osobą, która jest przed czasem. Oh, maybe I will switch to English. You are the fourth person that is before the time.
Yes, that's right.
And a lot of, so actually it's almost half an hour. So.
Okay, I wanted to check if everything.
Also, we have Isabel
right
that is much faster than 6. So hello, Isabel. Hello, Isabel.
Ponieważ mamy trochę czasu jeszcze, to ja sobie gdzieś tam jeszcze podejdę, trochę herbatki zrobię i zaraz będę wracał.
No problem at all. So as I understand, Isabel, you are from Spain. Are you?
Yes, I'm from Peru.
Oh, Peru. Okay. Okay, so we have guests around the world. So I'm really happy about it.
Okay.
So I will get back in a second. Hello. Hello, David. Nice to see you.
Hi. All right, so we're doing this with Zoom, which means I'm going to have to do what? Share my screen?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so.
So first time in the history of this, let's say, meetup, there were any people before half an hour. So,
Okay.
so I'm glad that you're here because I think you are a celebrity for these people because they want to be sure that they will that there will be room for them to listen to your presentation.
Yeah, we're doing another one of these with New Zealand and Australia on Monday. And actually Zoom doesn't have enough capacity. So we're using our GoToWebinar account so we can have up to 300 people. Let's test the screen sharing right now. Actually, I see your lips moving and I don't hear you talking anymore.
Jacob, you're muted for some reason, I think, or your mic stopped working. Sorry for interrupting. David, also just one quick question as you're setting up. Hi, and thanks for being here. The same you're having the same presentation for the New Zealand group on Monday, right? This is exactly the same content, or is it going to be a bit different?
You know, I might change one or two slides if I think that they need improving or something, but the intent was to use the same material. Yeah, why do you ask?
Gotcha. Because I actually signed up for the New Zealand group before I knew we have a Polish time zone one. And to be completely honest, I don't really want to wake up before 8 a.m. on Monday if I don't have to. So that's the only reason. But thank you so much.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, if I add one or two slides or change one or two, that's all, you know. It's actually took quite a bit of effort to put today's presentation together, so I'm glad I don't have to do a new one for every single webinar. Let's test the screen sharing right now, because I've never actually shared my screen on Zoom. At least I don't think I have. If I did, it was a long time ago. It gives me like a choice of applications. Okay. Right, so can you guys see that?
For me, it's perfect.
Yeah, let me just try changing a slide.
Yes, we can see.
Yeah,
It's works fine. Thank you.
Perfect. All right, so I'll stop the share for now. Of course, now we should test it again to make sure that doing it once didn't break it. I think it wasn't Zoom, but some similar technology I was using about a year ago, and that's exactly what happened. It worked perfectly the first time, and then exiting out of it, I don't know, it got confused. So when we actually went live, it didn't work, and it required a rebooting.
Guys, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, so I had some problem. So David, you said something about capacity of Zoom. So we have a license for 500 people. So probably it will be enough. And still we are streaming it on YouTube. So I think it will be enough. we have enough throughput for 500 people.
You're streaming it on YouTube. Can you give me the link for that?
Of course.
There might be one or two people on my team that will want to watch it.
Of course, I will put it to the chat.
Perfect. Thank you.
No problem. So, David, where are you now?
I'm at home. I'm in my house in my home office in well, it's outside of Bilbao, but close to Bilbao.
Oh, in Spain, actually. Okay.
Yeah, I'm at my house in Spain. I've been here since the shutdown. I was in Seattle right before that, and I made a decision, last minute decision, to come here. And I think at the time, none of us really thought that the lockdown would be just quite as long. I think this is day 56. I've lost track a little bit.
Hi, hello.
Hello, guys.
Hello, everyone.
Oh,
Hello?
So David, I have an idea. So is it okay that we start 5 minutes after 6 o'clock?
Yeah, that's fine. No.
Yeah. So actually, this is
I
part
don't
of.
have anywhere else to go tonight.
Okay. Actually, this is part of Polish culture that we are not
It's
every
no
time.
problem.
We are not always on time. Okay. Cool.
So what? Silence off top.
Okay. So maybe do you have any questions to David? So he's a creator of Kanban, so he know a lot about it. So.
Yes, please TLDR for Kanban.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Hi. So while we're waiting, so what's the best metric that you have ever seen, David?
You know, it's the usual consultant answer of it depends.
I like it.
I know. I would expect that. So most common one that you see most value and it's easiest to implement?
Oh, by far that has to be lead time.
Customer system.
It's not even a debate or a contest.
Okay.
It is by far the most important, valuable metric.
The customer
and it's
one,
not
or
difficult to gather. You know, you write the start date on a ticket when you create it or when it gets committed, and you write the end date when it's finished, and that's all you need.
All right. And if you would need to choose one, cycle time and lead time, it would be which one? Lead time, as you said?
Oh, this is a dangerous question, I'm afraid.
I know.
You know, there's a lot of, I would say, very poor quality information that now dates from quite a long time ago about cycle time. And I think we could point the finger of blame at various companies or individuals. But the bottom line is that the definition we use for lead time is unambiguous. Right? From where something is committed until it's ready for delivery, it's ready for the customer to receive it.
Yeah.
And that is the most valuable metric. Local cycle times, maybe you use them to derive some improvements, but by far, it's not even a close contest. Right? If you didn't bother to record any other metrics, wouldn't have much impact. If you don't record lead time, you'll never get beyond maturity level 1.
Yeah. Thanks, David.
And David, if you are talking about the lead time, you are starting usually from the customer lead time or system lead time, as system lead time may also blur us some information.
So I think that both of them are going to give you a benefit, but you know, again, the definition we use is unambiguous. Lead time starts at the commitment point. And if there's a difference between customer lead time and system lead time, it's because your Kanban system doesn't start from the commitment point. And that's a lower maturity issue that you would gradually fix. You would gradually move things upstream.
But David, the challenge I have, a lot of the people are very reticent about using class of service and risk profiles instead of prioritization. This is a big challenge for me. They are constantly trying to move things. They want to put these absolute priorities, which obviously are problematic in a lot of cases. What's your kind of moving a team mindset into that direction?
Yeah, you're right. It's a non-trivial challenge. There are several, you know, you first of all, you ask, well, what are people afraid of? Why do they not just want to switch? Well, they're happy with what they're familiar with. They're comfortable with it, perhaps. they might know that it's not giving them very good quality information or being very helpful or useful, but they're comfortable with it. And therefore they're afraid of looking less competent using some other approach. So there's that personal fear. And there seems to be a tremendous desire to work with speculation and wishful thinking and imaginary numbers. And there's a significant amount of busy work involved in speculating about the future, about how long something will take or how big it is or whatever. And these people are essentially employed, they've been employed for some chunk of their professional life to speculate about things, to deal with speculation and imaginary numbers and wishful thinking. And if you take that away, if you switch to a fact-based approach, establishing a fact about something usually takes a few seconds. It doesn't take any great length of time. And then filtering things on facts like we do with risk profiling, again, it doesn't take any great length of time. And it really changes the role of the person. Previously, they're this kind of pointy-hatted wizard who, you know, is the village witch doctor who runs around shaking sticks at things and spreading tea leaves. And they make a decent living out of this witch doctory thing. And so they're demystifying all of that with some fact-based, evidence-based, more sort of scientific approach. That's very threatening. It's threatening to their identity. It's threatening to their position. It's almost 10 years ago now, there was a guy at a conference, it was in Finland, it was a panel session. I was facilitating the panel session. And this guy sitting at the back stuck his hand up and he said, hello, you know, I've been at the conference a day and a half, and I'm coming to the conclusion that if you're doing this Kanban thing properly, you actually don't need any product owners. And you know, this hadn't been said explicitly at the event, but at the time, before we had the concept of a service request manager role, someone who facilitates the upstream replenishment and things, that kind of thing, that was our opinion. Actually, if you've got product owners, well, we start with what you do now, but yeah, if you don't have them, we kind of prefer that they weren't there. So I said, well, do you have a question? And he said, well, my question to the panelists is, what would you do if your company recently hired 400 product owners? You know, and this is Finland. You know, it's a country where you know, employees aren't just for Christmas; they're for their whole life. So there's an element of that, and it's without doubt that upstream stuff and changing that behaviour is a challenge. And I think the two basic reasons are it's busy work for someone, and those people, and that busy work is witch doctory, staking, and tea leaf reading. But the people who do that for a living are quite happy to just keep collecting a paycheck for that. That's the fundamental thing. There isn't a short, easy answer for your question, but I do have a general coaching approach for those kind of obstacles that with Kanban, we don't go around telling people you're getting a new job, a new role, or a new responsibility. Instead, if we want, say, a product owner to behave like a service request manager, someone who facilitates the replenishment meeting, who owns the risk assessment framework, who owns the policies around cost of delay and the demand shaping threshold and all the things that go with that. Well, the way we position that from a coaching perspective is these are the behaviors we value, and being the single ringable neck, the bus factor of one, the superhero prioritizer isn't a behavior that we value anymore. And if you adopt these new behaviors, we will, not only will we value you more, it will make you a better version of yourself. So you get to keep the product owner title. We just want you to do it in a different way. And if you do it in this different way, that's a better version of who you are now. So in general, our approach to getting people to change their behavior is that this new behavior makes you a better version of you, rather than this new behavior changes you into a different person, a different identity. You know, people will resist different identities, but if there's a perceived either elevation in status, or they have to change in order to maintain their existing status, because if everyone else changes around them, then their perception in the local social group, the society they work in, that will go down. So if they perceive that they either have to learn these new behaviors to maintain status or potentially achieve more, but it's not a change in their identity, it's just making them a better version of themselves. How are we doing, Jacob? Do we have?
I think actually we should start. So maybe I will introduce, do a little short introduction. So this is David J. Anderson, creator of Kanban methods. So I don't have to say anything more. So they are yours, David.
That's it. That's the introduction. You want me to screen share now?
Yeah. So I rather like to have a good short lead time, not to talk too much.
All right, so there's about 70 people online, but yeah, I guess if you're streaming to YouTube, for quite a lot of people, it's easier. All right, tell me if you can see this.
I can see it.
Yep, we can see that.
All right, very good. Well, welcome everyone. It's an unusual way to start your weekend, Friday night, but thank you for your time. I'm going to talk about how we see Kanban as refreshing, and you're going to find me using maybe some new language you haven't heard before, how we're positioning the Kanban method and the other things that we do going forward in this decade. We're not worrying too much about what might have happened in the previous 1 or 2 decades. So also some of you will recognize this character on the screen here. He is one of the cartoon characters in the cover.
David, excuse me just for a moment. We have so Martina Ferreira asked if you can do something about the sound, because she heard she hear echo in the voice. So is it possible that you could just switch a microphone or something, or it's just impossible?
The question is whether it's with me or not. Right? So this is the microphone for my headset.
Mm-hmm.
Is that making any difference?
So guys, is it better or it's the same?
It's the same.
Okay, so people said it's the same also on the chat. So I don't know. So if you have any idea what can we do about it, we could just fix it.
Does everyone think it's echoing?
Is the room echo?
Okay.
Yeah, it's pretty concrete. It's not
yeah, because there is an empty space behind you.
Okay,
I think it's like echoing, but we can still understand you well. So
yeah,
I think we can continue like.
So if we have no idea how to improve it, so I think we can continue. So that's my feeling, that I understand you correctly.
don't know if there's anything I can do on this end. So it's just echo. I can only imagine it's echoing off the walls, but you know, it's the same headset that I use for plenty of other things. No one else complains.
Okay, so I recommend that we could just continue, and I think maybe it's not perfect, but it's good enough.
The advice on the chat that if everyone else mutes, that may well have a positive impact, because if for any reason someone's making a feedback loop, that will be creating the echo. All right, back to the screen share. And you can all see that? Yeah.
We can see it.
All right, so let's talk about how. Okay. Kanban provides a refreshing approach to managing your business. Let's talk about that. So this is a new ad campaign, and you'll be able to get this as a poster. We will be making this available as a download on our website. I'm not sure when, sometime later this month, and you'll be able to print it as a poster. We think it's less important right now because no one's working in an office, so why would you want a poster that you can put up on your wall? Those of you who are interested can look in the appendix of the PDF that Jakob will share with you for the background on what inspired this campaign.
I have it, and I will provide it to you.
Yeah, because for those of you who are interested in marketing, there's quite an interesting backstory on this campaign. All right, so we have our tester guy from the book cover, and he's pretty stressed out at work, and then he discovers Kanban, and for the sake of the cartoon, keeping it simple, it's a pretty low maturity Kanban implementation there, and he gets into it, and it starts helping him, and now it's a happy chap. It has refreshed him, and we are interested in what ways is Kanban refreshing. So we think it refreshes employee engagement, it refreshes your product and service delivery, it will refresh your customer satisfaction, your economic performance, your organizational culture, and your business resilience. And we're going to talk about each one of those in turn. So how does Kanban deliver such a refreshing change? Well, visualization, I think on this call you're all familiar with that. Relief from overburdening, evolutionary change, a sense of purpose, explicit values, and organizational maturity. We're going to talk about these as we go along. So we'll start with the first of those 6 bullets, employee engagement. So here's the cartoon from the Kanban book, and what do we see in terms of employee engagement here? Well, first of all, they've visualized their work, the workflow. Depends what they've got on the tickets, but they may well know who the customers are. They might know the risks that are being managed on behalf of those customers. So they're engaged with what they're doing, who they're doing it for, why they're doing it, who they have to collaborate and cooperate with, and where the work is, what still remains to be done on it. And while the cartoon quite clearly is a lower maturity implementation that doesn't have WIP limits, we would expect a Kanban implementation to have proper WIP limits and have some, therefore, individually they're relieved of overburdening, and the system, the workflow from end to end is relieved of overburdening. And we also expect them to have some hope that the fourth character in the cartoon shows an act of leadership and says, let's do something about it. And therefore, the rest of the employees should be hopeful that things are going to get better around here. And hopefully they have a sense of purpose, that they understand who their customers are, what they've asked for, perhaps even why they've asked for it, certainly what their expectations might be. And they recognize that they come to work in order to fulfill those customer expectations. That they know the purpose of their business, they know why they have a role to play, they know what they have to do, what's expected of them. And in order to get that done, they have to cooperate with each other, there's some collaboration, and they have to trust one another in their immediate teams, but also other people in the organization. They need to be able to work together as a larger set of humans to deliver on their purpose. And if they're doing all of that, they're going to have alignment and unity, get a lot of humans all moving in the same direction, trying to achieve the same goals. And when I wrote the Kanban book, I used the word team a lot, because if you look in an English dictionary, the definition of the word team is a group of people who are working collaboratively together on a shared purpose. A team isn't 5 or 6 people who sit together doing the same work, or who stand at the same stand-up meeting every morning, or who identifies being part of the same scrum. But unfortunately, the Agile community views the word team that way. And that's not the sense I was using it when I wrote the Kanban book. The word team in the Kanban book could be 2,000 people. Be a team of 2,000 people running 2 or 3 business units that collaborate together on the portfolio of a large-scale enterprise. And if there's good leadership, if there's good management, then there will be unity and alignment across that very large group of people, and they're all working as a team. That was the concept in the Kanban book when I used the term team. So the employee engagement is coming from visualization, WIP limits, from the way that they manage change. They understand their system, they have empowerment to act, and it's incremental and evolutionary change. It's less risky, it's a lot less inertia, it's easier to get something done, to make some small improvements, and one small improvement, another one, it snowballs. Customer service, they should be aware of who their customer is, what they've asked for. Hopefully they're aware of the expectations, and if they're very good, they'll also know why. Why did the customer have those expectations? That they're trusted and respected, that they feel a sense of their fellow workers, the wider organization, trust them, respect them. They collaborate with other people, they're empowered, and the work that they do is predictable and they do it transparently. Consequently, their customers trust them, the wider organization trusts them, regulatory authorities trust them, and so on and so on. And they get unity through a shared sense of purpose, cooperation across organizational boundaries. In a Kanban world, you reorganize as a last resort. Instead, you use Kanban to drive cooperation across organizational boundaries. You improve the level of trust, you improve the sense of shared purpose, you improve the unity and alignment. You don't reorganize people. Spending a lot of time and money reorganizing businesses is terribly wasteful, and it's disruptive and uncomfortable for the people involved. Wastes a lot of time. Moving on to number 2 on our list, product and service delivery. How does Kanban refresh that, right? How is it refreshing the parts other methods cannot reach? Well, there's a Kanban pattern to suit every situation in your organization, And some of you may have seen me present Kanban patterns before, and you'll know it's a pretty deep catalogue. We don't have time for all of them in today's session. But the key to it is that you learn to identify services. You all work in service industry companies. That's what you do. The government will tell you that. Accountants will tell you that. Tax collectors will tell you that. Economists will tell you that. You work in the services industry. Therefore, learn to manage your business as though it was a service. It doesn't sound like rocket science, but it seems remarkably difficult for a lot of people. And we actually have to teach that in class. We have to teach people how to look around the company they're working in, a service industry company. And we have to teach them how to see services. We ask simple questions like, you walk in a Starbucks, what service are they in? You walk into Starbucks, what do you ask for? Well, a cup of coffee. So what service are they in? They're in the making cups of coffee service. And therefore, we need to get people into the mindset of thinking that way, to be able to look around their organization and see the services. Now, if you can see services, everywhere you find a service, you can build a Kanban system for that. And it could be a simple personal Kanban. You might have an executive and their role is to approve something. And from time to time, you send them requests for approval. They're operating an approval service. Why not put a personal Kanban board on the door of their office? And when you want something approved, you write a ticket, you walk up and you stick it on the door. We know people who've done that. So you can have personal Kanban. We're now calling that enterprise Kanban for one, and you'll start to see us talk about that a lot more publicly. The concept of personal Kanban in the workplace as part of a wider network of services, as part of a wider enterprise services initiative. So you could have a personal Kanban, you can have a team Kanban, you can have a workflow Kanban. That workflow could be downstream of your commitment point, or it could be upstream. It could be a discovery and innovation Kanban. It could be a portfolio Kanban. It could be a project Kanban. And I'm sure that there are more variants, right? For every service you can find, you can implement a Kanban system for it. And for some, it will make sense to have a Kanban board and visualize it in a way that we're familiar. And other times, maybe that's not appropriate. Maybe it's enough just to have a piece of software that keeps track of some other system for managing the requests. So here's the cartoon again from the book, right? We have evolutionary change in action. We can just go back here briefly. Number 3, regularly review the network and its policies to improve the outcomes. And if we look here, it's very clear from the visualization and from the narrative, the discussion, that everything is not running smoothly for these people. That I'm stuck, I'm too busy, I'm idle. There's a lot of tickets in analysis. There's only a few in dev, but the girl who works in development is complaining they're too busy, and the tester's got nothing to do. So clearly things are not flowing. There's some problem in the world, but we're going to do something about it. So at an individual service level, we improve the individual Kanban systems. And then to scale that, if you've got these, the diagram on the right is showing nodes in a network, and each one of those is potentially a Kanban system, the customer care group, the sales group, there's an authorization service, there's marketing, there's product management, and so on. And this particular diagram is based on a real case from a German bank. And imagine there's a Kanban system for each of those, and what impedes one from improving is dependencies on the other ones. Well, we resolve that by using the Kanban cadences, the feedback loops, the higher level feedback loops, the risk review, the operations review primarily, maybe the strategy review, maybe the replenishment meeting, maybe the service delivery review. But we need some mechanism for understanding how work flows through the network and how dependencies affect it in order to drive improvements. So this is a very old photograph from 2007, very early, large project Kanban board. And altogether, this project was more than 10 million US dollars. And we have 5 development teams in this project, and they have a lane on the board for each. And they build features. The green tickets represent features. They represent features that the customer asked for as part of the project scope. And the yellow tickets, they represent user stories, things the programmers build that are meaningful units of work for the programmers. The yellow tickets, therefore, the user stories are the children of the features. So we've got a parent-child hierarchical dependency. But if we were to ask the question of each development team, what service are you in? The answer is, we are in the feature development service. We pull features from upstream on the board, and we design, build, and test that feature, and we deliver it for integration testing. So each one of them represents a service, 5 dev teams, 5 services. Now, the column here represents it says resolved, which is a funky Microsoft language for testing. And the test team in this case was an outsourced vendor in Chennai in India. And we know that they're a shared service because there's a width limit at the top of the column. So we've got 5 dev teams, and they were in Seattle, and they're using a shared service to do the testing of their user stories, and that team's in Chennai in India. Now, the team in India could have a board that looks kind of like the one that I've drawn in the pop-up here in the bottom right of the picture. They treat each one of the dev teams as their customers, as though they're serving 5 different customers. And then they do their own thing, whatever it takes to do testing. They have their own workflow. But at the board in Seattle, the project board doesn't need that level of detail, just a column to know it's in testing. So we've got testing as a shared service. Now, the little orange tickets on the board, they're actually avatars for people. And if you look carefully, you'll see that they're all names of individuals. And those individuals are specialists in some way. They're offering some form of shared service. Some of them are enterprise level specialists, like the enterprise architect, who's offering a shared service across the entire portfolio, not just this project. Then some of the people are specifically allocated to the project, matrix managed onto the project, but they're still specialists, and they offer some service like database administration or user experience design to the individual dev teams. There aren't enough of these specialist people, nor is there enough demand to justify having some of them on every team. Instead, they provide a shared service. Now, these avatar tickets do show who they're working with and who they're collaborating with, but there's no reason to prevent the individuals with these avatars having their own personal Kanban board and treating not just the current ticket that they might have their avatar stuck on, but anything else that's queuing for them coming from anywhere else, treating those as different customers.
David, just for a moment, excuse me. I'm sorry very much to interrupt you. So could you speak louder? Because I received few feedbacks from people that sometimes they can't hear you really well.
That's very surprising.
microphone. So maybe you use your laptop microphone or something like this. Is it possible? So.
Wait. I think you're right. I think that my headset actually isn't working. Let's try to resolve this. Okay, can you talk again, Jakob?
Yes, I can talk again.
Talk again.
Again.
The sound of quality of sound is the same.
Yeah. Okay. So this is really weird. But
so on
other
the left,
applications
on the left,
David, I think it's fine. Like we understand you well. We are hearing some echo, but we are hearing well.
So let's do the last thing. So on the left down corner, you see the microphone icon, and next to it you have a, let's say, a small button, and there you can switch the microphone. So maybe you could just try it, and if not, you could just speak louder. That's all.
Yeah, so how's that working now?
Whoa, it's much better.
Yeah, okay. Zoom had changed the headset.
So we improve it collaboratively, like in Kanban.
All right, let's see if we can get this working again. No, what do I need to do here? Okay, can you see that?
Yes.
All right, good. Right, so let's move on to the third one on our list, customer satisfaction. Well, understand your customer's purpose. If you want satisfied customers, you need to know why they're asking you for something, what they're asking for, and what their expectations are. And their expectations are going to appear in actually 3 dimensions. They're going to care about the design or specification of what you're doing. They're going to care about how well you implement it, whether it actually works as intended, and they're going to care about their experience of doing business with you or the service delivery time. And you need to define meaningful key performance indicators, meaningful KPIs, which are related to those things, those customer expectations for the design, implementation, and service delivery, and then drive improvements using these meaningful metrics. And I think a lot of organizations really struggle with this, right? They struggle to define good KPIs. They lack the feedback loops that we would call the Kanban cadences. And they don't drive improvement because they've got the wrong metrics and they don't have the appropriate feedback mechanism. But if you do those things, you should earn your customer trust by gradually improving. And we use this term customer intimacy. In the Kanban maturity model, we use 3 terms: customer awareness. You know who your customer is, you know what they asked for. Customer satisfaction, you know what their expectations are, you can define some KPIs based on that, and you're capable of gradually improving and hitting them. And customer intimacy, you know why your customer has the expectations they have. You understand their context and the risks that they're managing, and therefore you understand how to make good quality trade-offs between competing demands. And we have a solution for this. We call it the Fit for Purpose framework. And Alexei Zhegloff and I wrote a book on it. And all of this work came out of a simple question: how do you know whether a change will be an improvement? We're proposing a new feature to our design. Is that better or not? We're proposing some change to the way we do the work, the way we implement what we're doing. or we're proposing a change to our processes for delivery or customer experience, and will that be an improvement? And actually you can anticipate that stuff. So you shouldn't be flying blind. You shouldn't always be in a reactionary world of, we experimented, we tried something and we waited to see whether it was going to be better or not. You should actually be able to be a lot smarter than that and to have a pretty damn good idea before you do something, whether it's going to be an improvement. And we find that there's a lot of commonly recurring customer expectations. Customers care about time-related things, right? So predictability, duration, timeliness. Did you deliver when I needed it? How long did it take? And did you meet, were you within my expectations or the promises you've made? And do you do that consistently? And then same with quality. Did you deliver me the functionality I expected, specification I expected, and was it at the right level of fidelity? If I ordered a ham and pineapple pizza, did you deliver me a ham and pineapple pizza, and was it warm and tasty? Was it well baked? Customers care about safety and conformance, more so in some industries than others. They care about affordability. They care about optionality. It depends on the product, but more durable goods. If you think you're going to own something for a while, the purpose for which you're owning it might change in the future. And therefore you'd like the product to be reconfigurable in some way so that you can use it for multiple purposes. And we care about convenience. We care about geographical convenience. We care about the convenience of time, and we care about accessibility. So if you make something more convenient, generally people are going to like that, or at least it gives you a competitive advantage. If you improve the optionality of something, people will like it, or it will give you an advantage. If you can improve the affordability of it, you'll probably broaden the market. You must meet safety and conformance requirements. And if you don't meet quality and speed requirements, you leave yourself open to attack from a better provider. And the good news about this stuff is Kanban helps you with the first four. And the next edition of the Fit for Purpose book will cover numbers 5 and 6. We already cover that in the Fit for Purpose class, but the current second edition of the book doesn't cover number 5 and 6. And if you want to know more about this, you can get the book. The current second edition, this is how it looks. And it's very accessible book, and it's not a book about Kanban in that sense. It's a book about strategic marketing and customer experience, defining the right metrics. It's an organizational leadership and management book. Right, number 4 on our list, economic performance. Well, economics can be improved in several ways. Producing more value for the same effort, producing something faster, avoiding cost of delay. So doing something faster doesn't in itself improve the economics. The advantage comes from the fact that you got it earlier, or you were able to delay starting until later. And to delay starting until later, you need to have confidence that you can do something quickly and predictably. You need to have a good idea of your lead time from your Kanban system. Then selecting items with greater payoff, things that have more value for the same effort. And reducing costs, spending less money on your existing activities. So finding ways of doing the same thing cheaper. Or reducing and eliminating wasteful activities such as rework or unnecessary planning or analysis. anything that is non-value adding from the customer's perspective, if you could do less of it, you will save money, providing, of course, doing less of it enables you to either repurpose the people who were doing that work onto something else, or to get rid of those people and therefore drive cost out of the business. Right. And Kanban helps directly with all four of these. Okay, we have to throw in a little bit of fit for purpose in our enterprise services planning to cover number 3, but producing more, producing things faster, and identifying activities that are non-value adding and can be eliminated. Kanban really directly helps with all of those. And some results that we've seen over the years, and if you're familiar with the Kanban maturity model, easy, intermediate, and harder on this is actually levels 2, 3, and 4. So this is based on real case studies and documented evidence that we see productivity improvement up to 8 times. So producing the same types of work 8 times faster, or doing 8 times more in a given time period, and reductions in lead time that exceed 90% in good implementations. But even in fairly mediocre implementations, maturity level 2, 25 to 50% more, and up to 70% faster, earlier. Those are really significant impact. If we think about this back here on number 1 and number 2, you can get between 25% and 700% more, and you can get it from 70% earlier to 95% earlier. Those numbers are massive. One of the better documented economic improvements was at the BBC, where one department of 30 people, they produced going about 8 times faster in terms of productivity. But actually what that did is it enabled them to realize an additional 1 million British pounds in revenue from that department in a year. Or in other words, each individual contributed more than £30,000 in additional revenue, and that's just pure profit. That just falls straight through to the bottom line for BBC Worldwide. That's a massive impact economically. If we think about what those people were earning, probably an average salary of about 45,000. So these improvements almost paid for their salaries. And classes of service map to cost of delay, that helps with number 3. That's just one of the things that, it's a standard thing in Kanban. It helps with number 3. More advanced things, risk assessment framework, deeper understanding of cost of delay. Those things help more. We don't have time in today's session to get into that in a lot of depth. And then cost reductions. So if you're doing Kanban properly, you probably need about 85% less planning time and effort. And particularly for dependency management, we know that we can eliminate about 85% of your dependency management expense. In fact, we're so confident about this that if your item isn't a fixed state class or service item, you really don't need to do the dependency management. We have better solutions for that. Reduced rework. It's pretty typical in case studies to see up to 90% less defects, essentially tickets that go backwards. And we control that in all sorts of ways. People who are relieved of overburdening, they get better. There's perhaps clearer requirements, clearer definition of whether a ticket's pullable to the next stage. And then eliminating unnecessary rework. So very common before we implement Kanban, a lot of abandoned work, thousands of tickets in Jira, and we say, really? How many of those tickets are you ever going to finish? How many of them have been in there so long you would consider you've abandoned them? And even the very first ever one of these that we did at Microsoft in 2005, they had 50%, approximately 50% abandoned tickets. And then aborted is we committed to it, we started it, but we didn't ever finish it. And Kanban helps dramatically with those things. Right, now, our method of planning, the selecting, scheduling, sequencing, prioritizing, getting very sophisticated at that stuff, collectively we call that enterprise services planning, and we teach it, and it's packaged in various different ways nowadays. So fit for purpose is part of it. And then we have a series of one-day classes we call Agile Pain Point Solutions. And they're basically just enterprise services planning material repackaged into one-day chunks. But enterprise services planning is a 5-day class in 3 modules or 3 separate tracks that spans from strategic planning through to some quite detailed program portfolio, program management type stuff. Okay, number 5 on our list, organizational culture. How does Kanban refresh your organizational culture? Well, culture is at the heart of the Kanban maturity model. And this is our new logo for the Kanban maturity model and 1.2 release, which is imminent, end of this month. And our new mantra that the culture follows values, practices follow culture, and outcomes follow practices. So if someone says, I really want to have trustworthy, fast, predictable delivery, that's an outcome. Well, how do we get that outcome? Well, we have to adopt some practices. The practices have to come before we get the outcome. And we know those practices are things like using Kanban, using lead time metrics, using the Kanban cadences, understanding who the customer is, what they asked for, what their expectations are, and gradually improving by using the right metrics. Practices follow the culture. People will say, well, you know, we can't do pull systems here, or you know, we can't measure lead time, or whatever it might be. Usually these things are cultural in the organization. The resistance is coming from the culture. The culture has to be changed. And you drive cultural change by encouraging the adoption of new values. So do we value flow? Do we value customer satisfaction? Do we value the fact that customers care about how long something takes and whether we delivered it on time? And if so, then we need to value flow. We need to value lead time as a metric. We need to value that the customer has an expectation for that lead time, and we need to improve and hit it. So this is the 1.1 release poster. We don't have the 1.2 ready yet, but it's the Kanban maturity model. And the values, there's a whole section on culture on here. The values are defined in a column. And I realize a lot of information on this picture, which you're welcome to study at some depth from the PDF, because I'm going to flick to the next screen here. That culture is one of the 4 main pillars of the KMM, right? That there's outcomes, practices, and culture, and they're all achieved through managed evolution. Culture, how we live around here, practices, how we work, and outcomes, how well we work, what we actually achieve. And the KMM models all of these. It's not just a practice map. Some maturity models that have come in the past, they haven't dealt with outcomes, they haven't dealt with culture. Well, we've codified all of this. We've looked at case studies, we've looked at field reports, we've looked at people presenting at conferences, we've seen with our own eyes at different clients, and we've codified all of that together, and we've codified the evolutionary process. So the culture is something which is really the sum of the values you have, and you saw that list of values, and the behavior. And what we're looking for is congruent behavior that's aligned with the values. And behavior is decisions and actions. Every time we take a decision, every time we take some action, those decisions and actions are either congruent with the value or they're not. Do we value flow? In which case we should be chasing down blockers. We should be reporting them. We should be measuring how long things are blocked. We should be measuring lead time and so on and so on. So it's not difficult to use an evidence-based approach to determine whether a value exists in an organization or not. And the KMM has adopted an evidence-based method for appraising the organizational culture. And if we're going to drive cultural change, we need to make it actionable for leaders, for managers who take the decisions and request the actions. So here's an example of how we go about doing that using a concept called decision filters. And this is something I published in 2009, based out of an academic paper that I co-authored in 2000, and I guess it was 2007, but it was 2008 when it was published. Value trumps flow, flow trumps waste elimination, and waste elimination trumps economy of scale. Now, if you teach that to leaders in an organization and say every time you're making a decision, you should hold that decision up to this filter. You know, are you choosing to sacrifice some flow, but because something is valuable, and I'm confident about that, we'll expedite at the expense to maximize the expense of flow to maximize value. And sometimes we'll take actions to improve the flow, even though those actions might be wasteful. So we might choose to have extra staff so that they're instantly available, even though that costs us more, because we want to keep things moving quickly. And waste elimination trumps economy of scale, drive efficiency through small batch sizes and fast turnarounds. In other words, drive down the economic costs of doing business, drive down the transaction costs, the coordination costs. And Kanban's very efficient in this respect. A replenishment meeting is a very low transaction cost for choosing new work. Delivery planning meetings are very low transaction cost for arranging the delivery. And the coordination cost of using Kanban is minimal. Kanban meetings are very short, and mostly workers are self-organizing to choose what to work on next. Very low costs. So a decision filter for every cultural value will deepen the organizational maturity. Now, if we pick one, leadership at all levels, that's one of the values from the Kanban maturity model. Here's an example of how you might do that. All right, so leadership at all levels, if you can do something about it, just do it. And act rather than ask permission, and it's better to try, even if you fail, than not to have made an attempt. If we use these as the filters for our decision making, we'll start to see a whole lot more leadership in our organization from a lot more people who we are encouraging to take risks and show a little bit of courage, because we've created a safe environment for that to happen. Right, so we develop leaders by teaching them decision filters and holding them accountable for the decisions and actions. And if culture has to follow values, we install values in an organization by installing the decision filters in the organization. So we've codified how do you achieve an outcome using the right practices? How do you achieve practice adoption by achieving the right culture? And you achieve the right culture by driving values adoption using these decision filters. And the KMM second edition book is due second week of June. And it's not quite finished yet, but it's in production at the moment. You're the first people to see the new cover. The new book will be about twice as thick as the old book. So if you have the first edition book, there's a lot of additional material, as well as just a general refresh on the practice descriptions, which you will have seen in the first edition. So it's definitely worth getting the second edition. It's a huge step forward. And there'll be a significant number of more additional assets you'll be able to download. Historically, we've had 2 posters. The practice map poster, the very detailed big A0 one, and the smaller one I showed you. There'll be several different versions of that, and we're working on those this month, and they'll be available also in June at the time of the book launch. So KMM 1.2 launching next month, and the second edition of the book based on the 1.2 release is coming imminently. Okay, so number 6 on our list was business resilience. How does Kanban refresh your business and make it more resilient? Well, there's a little bit of background in social psychology. Social psychologists divide the world into 4 categories: stability, inertia, incremental, and dramatic social change. Stability, people are happy, there's no pressure, so no change happens. Inertia, people are unhappy, they're very frustrated, but change doesn't happen. And we have a Polish audience here, and some of you are probably old enough to remember the communist era. And that was an era of a lot of frustration amongst the population. And for a long time, that there was no change, in fact, across the whole of the communist bloc, the Soviet bloc. And then eventually the frustration builds up, and then something dramatic happens. And of course, that all started in Poland and Gdansk. And eventually you see the end of the Soviet era, and the Berlin Wall comes down, the Iron Curtain is dismantled, and so on. So inertia is when people are unhappy, but there are obstacles in the way of them making change. Then incremental social change, they really mean evolutionary here. You've got unhappy people, but change is happening and there's little or no resistance, not much anxiety about it. But the changes are initially normative. Normative means changes to the way you do things. Structural change, on the other hand, means change to your relationships socially, your position in society, the level of dignity, respect, status, or recognition that you receive. So if you get a promotion at work, that's a structural change. If you're given a new job title, that's a structural change. But if someone offers to replace your existing smartphone with a new model, that's a normative change. If you download a new application, say to do something you used to do some other way, imagine you had a pocket calculator and now you start using the pocket calculator app on your phone, that's a normative change. And Kanban uses normative changes. We start with what you do now, and we change the how and the what. And structural change only happens in an emergent way. It's pulled, it's voluntary. And that is textbook incremental social change and social psychology. Where dramatic social change, we've got unhappy people, you make structural changes, so you reorganize things, you give people new job titles or whatever it might be. And that causes the people to suffer from anxiety, fear, stress, and to use a very technical version of the word crisis, clinical psychologists will use that word to mean, that you have sent an individual into crisis, that they're having some anxiety, fear, stress related to who they are or the role that they play or their status, their recognition, and the relationships that they hold. Their identity may be called into question. And that creates a huge amount of resistance and inertia. There it's changes to who you are and why you're there. And traditional agile methods and pretty much every software engineering methodology that ever preceded them, their dramatic social change, they are designed to push individuals into crisis. And that's fundamentally a problem, that we can improve the resilience of individuals and a business full of those individuals by not pushing them into crisis, by not giving them a situation where they're anxious, fearful, stressed out. So Kanban delivers incremental social change, and that's always been refreshing. I've been doing that for 15 years now. This list here comes from a recent book by Jared Diamond, and this is material directly out of the new Kanban coaching practices class. His list of 12 things is taken from clinical psychology, and it's a list of attributes that a clinical psychologist looks for in an individual to determine how well they will cope with crisis, how well they'll cope with the dramatic social change. And if you look down this list, you will see that Kanban and the wider Kanban community, and for that matter, a good Kanban coach, they can help you with up to 10 of these things, 10 of the 12 on this list. That it's still up to an individual business to acknowledge that they have a crisis and they need to take ownership of it and not play the victim, but perhaps a coach can help them with that. But building a fence, ring fencing the good, focusing only on the problems. Let's start with what you do now and figure out what's broken and we'll fix that. So Kanban does number 3. Get emotional and material help, both normative and structural in nature. We have so much material in our community in terms of case studies, conference videos, community meetup groups like this one. There's plenty of help out there. Use models or archetypes, case studies, experience reports, and of course all the models that we use to help you make sense of the world that you're in. Ego strength. I'll just take the pop-up away. That's the technical term. When a psychologist talks to you or me and they use the word resilience, when they talk to each other, they use the term ego strength. The strength of your ego is how resilient you're going to be. And on the next slide, you'll see that we've come to the conclusion that organizational maturity is the analogy for resilience, for ego strength of an organization. Honest self-appraisal, Kanban should help you with that because we've got lots of metrics and lots of feedback mechanisms. Previous experience of a crisis, developing institutional memory. Well, if you've been collecting the metrics for a while and you've been holding the cadences for a while, you should have institutional memory. Patience, a good Kanban coaching professional is trained to be patient. And flexibility about who, why, what, and how you do, the wiring your organization for change and knowing how to lead and manage change. Again, it's not a basic Kanban practice, more advanced thing that the Kanban coaching professionals and particularly accredited Kanban consultants are trained to lead. Explicit values, they're very explicit in the Kanban maturity model. And freedom from constraints, this Kanban helps you understand what your constraints are, the policies you've written, whether those policies could be changed or not, whether some of the things you think are constraining you are in your head rather than existential. So we've known this for quite some time, some years already, that the deeper the organizational maturity, the better the organization performs when stressed. That high maturity organizations perform better in a crisis, and when stressed, they will often respond by improving, where low maturity organizations tend to buckle under stress and regress. A level 2 organization becomes level 1 becomes level 0. Level 0 probably ceased to exist if you stressed it sufficiently. So organizational maturity is the analogy for resilience, and the Kanban maturity model therefore builds organizational resilience. It builds your capability to cope in a crisis. So it's a new diagram. You won't have seen this one before. The House of Enterprise Resilience, and it's made up of these 3 pillars: a service-oriented organization. You're in the service industry, learn to see those services. Use of enterprise services planning for planning, selecting, scheduling, sequencing, prioritizing work that flows through that network of services, and the Kanban maturity model for building resilience. And all 3 of those things are based on the Kanban method as a foundation. So Kanban refreshes all aspects of your business. Let your Kanban be your foundation for the resilience you need now and in the future. Kanban refreshes the parts other methods cannot reach. And just to resume from a list at the beginning, Kanban will refresh your employee engagement, your product and service delivery, your customer satisfaction, your economic performance, your organizational culture, and your business resilience. And just the final little infomercial slide at the end here, that there is a roadmap of Kanban university training. And Jakob, who invited me here tonight, he is an accredited Kanban trainer, and he can offer you the Team Kanban Practitioner and Kanban Management Professional training classes. And if you're interested in the more advanced stuff, Kanban Maturity Model, Kanban Coaching Practices, or Change Leadership Masterclass, or Fit for Purpose, or Enterprise Services Planning, please either reach out to me directly, my email is there, or contact our salespeople at David J. Anderson School of Management from djaa.com. Just click on the link and send us a message. And that's it. Thank you all for your time and attention. And perhaps we can have a chat, take some more questions now.
Mm-hmm. So do you have any questions to David?
Team engagement and those materials about Kanban maturity model and the teams. When you are starting in the company, how many times it happened that it occurred that, okay, first try to set up processes and then care about teams? So that it is in the opposite. So no focus on the teams, but in the opposite, just flows, etc.
Yeah, I'm just not a believer in the whole teams thing, to be honest with you. I think it's a massive misdirection. But my co-author on the Kanban maturity model, Teodora Bozeva, says, you know, if I walk into an organization, their maturity level 0, they don't even really have teams, then we're going to take them immediately to maturity level 2. We're going to skip level 1 altogether. Level 1's only there because if we arrive in an organization where they've got these very inwardly focused teams, we have to start with that. We have to start with where you are now. But if they're at level 0, we're going to use the material that's taught in the Kanban Management Professional training, the static method, the system thinking approach to implementing Kanban. And we're going to start with who is your customer, what do they ask you for, what do you do to it, and where does it go? And we're going to build workflows right from the start. So the concept of an agile team, if it's not there, we're definitely not going to build it, and we don't care less. Because what you want is an organization focused on who its customers are, what did they ask for, what needs to happen in order to produce it, and let's get the people in our organization cooperating together in order to make that happen. And that would fit the English dictionary definition of a team.
Okay, I have a technical question, because you talk a lot about visualization, and it's easy to do in an office. But right now we have a special situation, coronavirus, we are working remotely, and I have a problem with visualization, because you can have a board in Jira or another software, but it's still somewhere on the tab in the browser, and you can close it and no one's seeing this. So how we can do visualization in Kanban in the time right now, like this?
Yeah, I completely understand your observation, and I think you're right that visualization is difficult right now. It's going to be difficult for the next few years. And why we like visualization is because it engages people emotionally. It engages their limbic brain, their sensory perception. And we like that because people tend to experience emotional engagement in fairly similar ways. So if you have a large group of people, 20, 30, who work together, and they visualize something, most of them will experience that visualization in the same way. It will have the same sort of emotional impact on them. So we like visualization, and it's helpful. And right now we can't really do it very well. And even if we could, software like Jira, yes, it visualizes, but it's not the same emotional impact that a physical board has on the wall. So essentially, during this time of coronavirus, we're handicapped by this inability to visualize. However, visualization isn't the only way that you can engage people emotionally, and it's not while it's a handicap, it's not a complete impediment to making improvements. The very first Kanban implementation we did with Microsoft didn't have any visualization. It had a rudimentary version of what they now call Team Foundation Server, and everything was just tracked in a database. And the concept of a Kanban pull signal was actually a piece of embedded code in the database that triggered an email. So it was an email arrived in the project manager's inbox saying, you know, there's a slot free in the queue now, you can pull another ticket. So you have to look at other ways of engaging people emotionally if you can't visualize things. And I think that the requirement for managers, for leaders, is to up the ante on an understanding of purpose. So why are we here? Who are we serving? What are they asking us for? What are the expectations on that? And how well are we doing against it? So you need to be having the types of review meetings we describe in the Kanban cadences. You need to be using the right kind of metrics, and you need to be communicating very strongly who is the customer, what have they asked us for, what are their expectations, and ideally why are they asking us for it. And you need to unify people with that shared purpose. That visualization is not so readily available to you right now. And it's like somebody tied your arm behind your back or something. You have a handicap in change leadership at this time of coronavirus, and that's going to be true, in my opinion, probably for 3 years, maybe longer. And we need to recognize that that's the new normal. So over the next 3 years, next 5 years maybe, visualization of the 6 general practices in the Kanban world is going to be less important, and we're going to have to focus on some of the other things.
Thank you for answering.
But by saying that it is difficult, does it mean that it is impossible? So a lot of tools right now, the software one, the digital one, are better and better in this one. These are not perfect. Yeah, it is not building the engagement that we can build the flow as we can. We are limited to the tools, but still those tools are there. And if we are using these excuses that we can close the browsers, yeah, why we are doing the business? It should be also in our behavior, in the attitude. Okay, what are the direction, indication? Yeah, so from my experience, this could be just excuses, especially when it is much better software that, I don't know, 10 years ago, when it was very difficult to visualize as you wanted.
I think that's true, that the tools are getting better, and I'm sure that the current, let's say, both stress and an opportunity for these tool vendors mean that they will make a lot more innovation and they'll get better. On the other hand, there's a very general question, which is, how do you get people to use the tool? And my response is always the same. People will use a tool if it helps them get their job done. So if someone's leaving a tool unused, or a browser tab closed, or whatever it might be, it's because they don't perceive that they need to. There's a section of a talk that I've given many times, and it's now part of the KMM training class. I was on a phone call when I was doing some consulting at Huawei a few years ago, and 5 or 6 different groups from different cities in China were all on the call. And at one point I asked a question, and the manager on the other end in an office in Beijing replied by saying, I haven't looked at the lead time chart in months. So why wouldn't she bother using the lead time metrics that were being provided? Well, because she didn't need it to get her job done. It's incredibly informative to us. If she's not looking at the lead time chart, it's because nobody cares. Nobody cares how long things take, and no one's being held accountable if things take longer. So in a general sense, if people are not using a tool, it's because they don't feel the need to. And if you think they should be using it, then you need to ask yourself the meta level question of what needs to be true so that they have to use the tool. And what might need to be true is that they're being held accountable regularly, or that they're properly informed, and that there's a forum that makes it necessary for them to look informed, or they will lose status and recognition and respect because they're not informed. So if people are not using a tool, find a way to encourage them to use it. Or if they're not using the tool because it really isn't needed, then you don't need the tool. You know, do something else.
So
I have one question.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yes, Peter, please.
My name is Peter Arczewski. Thank you for the meeting, and especially for the organizer, what is Jakub, and for you, David, that you have the time to speak. I have 2 basic questions. Why Kanban exactly, like the method, or the, I don't know, the method to do it, everything? from where you was taking inspiration. Maybe I know from where, but maybe not everybody know. The first one, and the second one is how to make, for example, like a system. Kanban, I mean, many methods right now using, for example, Scrum, what everybody probably know, taking inspiration from user experience and many more. And what is your feeling about this kind of hybrid, if I can say? This is two short questions. Thank you so much.
I'm not sure I understood the second part of that. So the first part, what is Kanban and what inspired it? The Kanban method really, it combines two concepts, two things I was looking for between the time period of about 2002 and 2007, by the time I'd sort of resolved it. So the first one was that my observation in 2002 was that many organizations trying to adopt agile methods were choking on them and spitting it out or just flat resisting culturally. And while I didn't have the language that I've used with you tonight, that I didn't have the understanding that I do now of things like social psychology, I recognized that people were resisting because it was emotional. And I now understand that that was because it's very structural in nature. And we could get into the analysis of that, the psychological analysis of it a lot more deeply, and we do in the coaching classes. So I was looking for what I described at the time as an incremental approach to change, in the same way that the social psychologists use the word incremental. Let's start with what we do now and improve something. And so that started, I started looking for that in 2002. I started to recognize that there were a lot of organizations struggling to adopt Agile, but they were interested in greater business agility. And therefore, if Agile methods were going to be too unpleasant for them to swallow, then we needed something that was more incremental. And I started out down that journey, and as a sort of separate thread of investigation, I was encouraged to look at different ways of limiting work in progress and implementing pool systems, of which a Kanban system is one of those mechanisms. Kanban systems existed in physical industries like manufacturing and distribution. So the concept of could you do a virtual Kanban was useful, but initially I was only looking at it as a point solution for specific problems, like there was a high abandonment rate, so deferred commitment would be useful, or people were overwhelmed and therefore they needed relief from overburdening. But it turned out that the two things came together because and I didn't use the slide today, but the core concept in evolutionary change is that there must be a stressor, there must be some stress in the environment to motivate change. There must be a reflection mechanism, some feedback that allows you to say, oh, this is stressful, we don't like it. And then there has to be an act of leadership to say, this is stressful, we don't like it, let's do something about it. So there's three elements in an evolutionary change model of there has to be stress, there has to be a reflection mechanism, there has to be leadership. It turns out that the Kanban systems were generating the stress, because as soon as we start limiting the work in progress, you need to decide, what am I going to do now? What's going to wait until later? And if so, when? And what should I not do at all? And for many, many people, those are decisions they've never really had to face in their life before, at least not in their professional life. They just say yes to everything, and then they kind of pretend that nothing bad happened when half of the work gets abandoned and never delivered. So these two concepts came together, and it wasn't until I started writing the book down, 2009, that I recognized that these two things, the evolutionary change approach and the use of Kanban systems, it had become one single thing. And I called it the Kanban method because Kanban's the stressor in the evolutionary change.
Jakob, do we have the time? Maybe I will ask again about the second question, if it's still possible.
So this is a question to David, not to me. So David, do you have any time?
Well, you know, I'm happy to keep answering questions. There's still beautiful sunlight outside here in Spain. So carry on. I'll try and hear the second question again and see if I understand.
Okay. Right now we are seeing Agile community that many things is connecting. For example, design thinking with Lean Startup, and for example, Scrum, maybe with Kanban. And I would like to ask you what you think about something like this connection between, for example, Kanban, I don't know, Lean Startup, design thinking, and many, many methods. Are you thinking this is the future of kind of evolution, maybe Kanban? I'm not so sure I may be so clear explain you than my question, but.
So there are plenty of examples and some case studies even on our own website of companies that combined Lean Startup with Kanban, and it makes total sense really that you end up with some front end thing where you speculate about the viability of some feature or idea, and then you have a back end, some validation column where things that have been deployed into your production environment, they sit on the Kanban board so that you can gather market feedback and you can validate them. So there's plenty of that stuff goes on. There are people that use upstream Kanban with design thinking and so on. And I think that's all great. I've got no objection to people synthesizing what we're doing with other things that are working for them. I just don't feel that I have a particular role to play in that. That the work that we're doing tends to be driven by customer need. So the fit for purpose framework came about from people asking a genuine, it's a simple question to ask, a difficult question to answer. How do you know whether a change is going to be an improvement? And there really wasn't a good answer for that on the market. There were some methods that were based on what I would call witch doctory and wishful thinking and speculation about the future. And then there were other methods that were based on being reactionary. And frankly, the Agile movement's always been in that space, the whole idea that you react to what you see in the world rather than trying to anticipate it. And I think we're all living through a point in the history of the human race where we're being very reactionary to what we see in the world, when people who were maybe a little smarter, people like Bill Gates, who were out there anticipating that a virus could be worse than a war and trying to raise the alarm bells about it, no one was listening to them. So I tend to develop our own stuff when I see a gap in the market, and the fit for purpose framework filled a gap in the market. Enterprise services planning fills a gap in the market. The service-oriented organizational design stuff fills a gap in the market. And when there's something else in the marketplace that's serving a purpose and people like it and use it, that's great. But it's up to them to figure out how to integrate it with Kanban.
Okay, thank you so much.
And I have another question. What's, in your opinion, it's the minimum we should accomplish to say that we have Kanban, because many companies they think they have Kanban because they have Kanban board with to-do, doing, done, and that's it.
Yeah. You know, years ago, we created, before there was the Kanban maturity model, there was the depth of Kanban assessment framework. And before that, there was even a simpler thing, which is just the question. You know, if someone comes along and says, are we doing Kanban or not? My response to that is, it's not a practice adoption question, it's an intent question. So if you have the intent to pursue evolutionary change, evolutionary improvement, and you have the intent to do that in the pursuit of customer satisfaction and improved service delivery, and you're using some basic elements, visualization, but particularly limiting work in progress, or at least you would like to be, right? Then if you've bought into the concept with the right intent, you're pursuing the Kanban method. If you just happen to have a whiteboard on the wall with some sticky notes on it, yeah, no, you're not. So there was a very useful analogy, John, it was about 11 years ago now, by a guy called Joe Campbell, when he compared what I was doing with Bruce Lee's approach to Chinese martial arts, where traditionally for 3,000 years, Chinese martial arts were taught using kata and collections of kata, which are moves that people learn. Collections of them are bundled into what are known as pattern styles. And each pattern style has interesting names like monkey fist, things like that. And therefore you pick your pattern style, you learn the kata, you practice them a lot. And Bruce Lee basically came along and said, no, forget all of that. Let's just strip it back to first principles and you evolve your own personal style. You don't copy anyone else's style. And to me, that's a core concept for the Kanban method. That people need to recognize that they're trying to evolve their own personal way of working, their own unique processes in their own organization. They're not copying any templates. So they have to be buying into the intent of the Kanban method to be doing it. And then it's just a question of how well they're doing it, how deep they're into it. And if they're not deep enough in it yet, but they have the right intent, we can help them. If they just want to boast, oh, we're already doing Kanban, yeah, not so much.
I was asking about minimum because, for example, in Scrum, you cannot say that you have good Scrum if you don't have, for example, retrospective or planning. You have to have all of these elements. And in Kanban, for example, in my last company, we have this board and we said, okay, it's not Kanban because we don't have work in progress. So we set work in progress limits. But after several weeks, no one was keeping this limits.
Really, the bigger issue for me is I don't care, right? I don't care whether people are doing Kanban right or not. I don't care whether people are adopting it or not. And I don't really care for people who are interested in adopting it for the sake of it, right? What I'm really interested in is, are you improving? Are you helping people? Are you serving your customers better? And if someone comes along and they see some of my work and they adopt some of it, but other bits they don't bother, and then later on they come and they say, well, I've only done this little bit of it. I haven't bothered with all this other shit you published. And I say to them, well, did the stuff that you did use, did that help? Has that made your world better? Has it made the world better for other people? And if the answer to that's yes, then that's fantastic. I really only care about outcomes, right? The Kanban maturity model is based on outcomes, practices, and culture, and it leads with the outcome, and you achieve the level based on the outcome. We don't care how many practices you've adopted. Yeah, so questions like, are people doing Kanban right or not? It's just not interesting to me. It's an inherently tribal question about how big is the club. And I'm not doing this to, you know, be the leader of the pack, to run a club. I'm doing it because I genuinely think a lot of modern businesses, professional services, intangible goods businesses, they're really not very well managed. And it hurts in so many ways. It makes the working environment miserable for lots of people. It makes underperforming economics, but massively underperforming potential. And it leaves a lot of customers disappointed and frustrated. And we know that we can fix those things. That's a much more interesting thing to me than how big is the club and how many people are doing it right. That if I was a football player and you said, well, you know, I see in the street outside my house, there's some kids and they've thrown the jackets down in the street to make the goalposts and they're kicking the ball around in the street, but are they really playing football? Well, the answer is obviously yes, but they're not Real Madrid. And so it's always got to be a question of intent. And if the work that I'm doing is helping people, just like if kids get inspired by the players at Barcelona and they throw the jackets down in the street and they kick the ball around and they're having fun, everyone's a winner.
I have a question as well, if I may. I have a question regarding a Kanban team. What's the recommended rotation team taking into account the Kanban approach? Should people work together in one team for a long time to achieve progress?
So it just isn't a team-centric approach, right? The idea that you can encourage cooperation amongst different teams, different organizational units, the idea that you can orchestrate and compose different services together very rapidly in order to create some new customer-facing service, it doesn't really matter what team someone's in now or what team they're going to be in at some point in the future. The organization needs to be wired so that people cooperate with each other. And to do that, they need to understand why they're here. There needs to be a sense of purpose. There needs to be unity and alignment behind that sense of purpose. And we need to value that kind of cooperative behavior. We need to build the trust in the organization. And then whether people stay in one team for a long time or whether they move around, it doesn't matter so much anymore. Because on any given day, who do they have to cooperate and collaborate with in order to get something delivered, fulfill some customer request? Were those people on their team or were they from other teams? And that's the culture that I'm really driving for. So it's not particularly important that we start with where you are now, you know, and if you've got a very team-centric thing, then that's how we start with it. And if the teams stay together, then that's what we start with. But if you look at some of the very high maturity patterns in the Kanban maturity model, you'll see that there are situations where you end up with, like the board I showed you that had multiple development teams, but rather than have all the people dedicated to a single team, some of them are dedicated and some of them are floating. They can move around different teams. And a pattern like that really provides a lot of flexibility. It provides a great deal of liquidity to respond to ebb and flow in demand, different risks, different urgencies of things. It's a very powerful pattern for improving economic performance, but it's a high maturity behavior.
Okay, David, thank you for answering my question.
So to continue at that point, I'm living right now a very large I'm going to use this word, transformational thing that they're trying to do in a big organization, where they're trying to create this maturity model that was proposed by a big consulting firm. And so I get pushback from people basically saying, well, that's all wonderful and good, but it's not helping me deliver what I got to deliver. And and the metrics that they're using are very, they're very maturity oriented. And so when they're trying to make everything look like it's routine. And what you're talking about is that it's not routine. You're saying it's whatever it has to be in a particular place.
You know,
right?
if everything was routine, the world that you're living in is terribly boring. You don't need a lot of agility. And even before the coronavirus crisis, I suspect that that wasn't the case. And given the world that we're in now, where, honestly, annual planning, forget it, right? No one even knows when they can book an air ticket. So the reality of life right now is that you need to be able to rapidly reconfigure your business. So if I was using towards the end of the presentation when I was talking about resilience, and on those 12 points for resilience, there's flexibility. Well, the whole idea that you try to standardize everything, constrain everything to be routine is the opposite of resilient. It's fragile and brittle. So these consultants they're taking your money for something which it's good for them because it's easy to measure. It's easy for them to know when to submit their invoice, and it's easy for people to say, yes, we need to pay them now because we've checked off all the boxes on the objectives. But they're taking your money to leave you with an incredibly brittle and fragile organization in a world where you don't know when you're going to take your next vacation.
It's very true, but again, this is big company thinking, right? And so unfortunately, it's very challenging to, how can I say, turn an aircraft carrier, if you will.
Well, I think that's true, and these things are inherently cultural and values-based, and there is truth to the fact that big, rich companies, comfortable companies, right now, very rich companies don't have much to worry about in the virus crisis. But airlines, hotel chains, and they weren't rich to start with. Travel industry generally, very low margin industry, and they didn't have deep pockets to make them resilient. Where rich companies, banks are going to make out like bandits during this crisis. Because they're so comfortable, it tends to make them stupid, and it tends to make them there isn't enough stress in their environment, so they're not acutely focused on survival, and therefore it's easier they have to be seen to be doing stuff. But let's do something that doesn't really do anything, but it's measurable. Where I think if they really cared about specific outcomes, they would probably have hired different consultants, and the consultants would be paid on a different business model. and there would be a lot more outcome related expectation. Of course, from time to time, big businesses do fire the consultants because they didn't get and the consultants are there to take the blame. They expect to get fired. It's their role in life to be the scapegoat. So I would describe, or listening to your explanation, I would describe the organization as being in inertia. It's in a state of inertia. There's a lot of frustration. You carry some of that frustration. And while there's activity happening, it's not really change. And therefore, how long does that global warming problem have to heat up before the metaphorical equivalent of a 16-year-old strapping herself to the railings outside her school and declaring that she's on strike because there's a climate emergency? What's the equivalent of that for your business? And what tends to happen there is dramatic social change. That to do the thing we do, there is some truth to the fact you actually need to have some quite good leadership. There needs to be someone with that vision and with the sort of paternal view of things, that they want to start with what they do now and evolve and grow, and they care about things that are embedded in the Kanban maturity model. They care about long-term survival. They care about resilience and robustness in their business. They care about good customer service. So businesses like the Virgin Group, and although they're hurting really badly at the moment, they've got an airline, a cruise line, and a hotel chain in their portfolio, just to name three, and an entire chain of fitness centers as well. So in many ways they're hurting really badly, but they have a leader who cares about customer service and resilience and robustness and long-term survival, and before any of those, who actually cares about the staff and whether they're being properly looked after. That type of leadership is much more aligned to the philosophy that's built into the Kanban method.
I would like to ask you about some maybe dangerous question, I would say. What are you thinking about the professional Scrum with Kanban from Scrum work? Because I think so everybody in this meeting was heard about this, but nobody knows what you're thinking about this kind of trainee.
Yeah, so when they launched that, they hadn't bothered to inform us at all that they were doing it, but within a day or two, we put out our official position on it, which hasn't changed, to be honest, which is that overall, we think that's a great thing, that if people who were already using Scrum are now being given permission to try a little bit of Kanban, that's great. In fact, thinking back, I don't know, how long have they been doing it now? About 3 years. They really haven't been very successful at it at all. And I kind of prefer that they had been way more successful with it than they have been. The reason is that they would be populating the world full of maturity level 1, Scrum, Kanban, hybrid teams, people that have now been given permission to try a bit of Kanban, and it would really give us an opportunity to help those people take Kanban a lot further. So I had anticipated that they would populate a significantly sized market of maturity level 1, team-focused organizations who'd now tasted a bit of Kanban, and at least some of them would be interested in tasting more. And honestly, it just isn't happening. They're not being very successful with it at all. So you know, in theory, it was a good thing. It was going to help us, but it just isn't.
Okay, thank you so much. But possibly, do you thinking that in the future can be changing something? Because we also know that maybe PST is popular in Scrum, but we also call it Kanban. But definition of Kanban is a little bit different from professional Scrum with Kanban, I think so.
Yeah, their official position on that is that there's only 4 practices in Kanban because the other 2 Kanban general practices already exist in Scrum. You know, I'm not particularly interested in the detail. The reality is that, you know, I see the people who post the certificates very occasionally on social media, and the certificate says, I've learned to use some Kanban practices without changing Scrum. So it's very important to the Scrum people that you must be doing Scrum properly, that you must be adhering to all the religious rules. And it doesn't strike me that it's about helping people. So they don't share the same values that we share. They don't share the same sort of goals that they hope for. They don't seem to want to make the same sort of contribution to society that we want to make. And honestly, people are going to achieve a lot more value in their world by pursuing deeper maturity with the Kanban management professional classes, Kanban system design, and the Kanban system improvement classes that trainers like Jakob can offer in the market.
Thank you so much.
Hello, David. Hello,
Hi,
David.
David.
This is Diego. Go ahead. Sorry.
Now I see Diego, and I'm thinking, aren't you in Brazil somewhere?
I'm from Peru.
Oh, from Peru, right? Of course.
So I want to ask you, sorry for the question, because probably it changed a little bit what you were talking so far, but I'm interested in if you have any kind of planning to increment all the materials from the Kanban University in Spanish language. If you have that plan, regarding in Latin America, the Kanban community growing, you know, geometrically. Everyone is willing to learn more.
We have the commitment to put all the materials, so all being Kanban University materials, the website, the training classes, and the core books, and that will include the Kanban maturity model book. We have the commitment to put them into Spanish and Portuguese, and I hope that all of that will happen this year. You'll start to see a lot more language support in the next few months, but our plans for this year got a little bit disrupted with the coronavirus crisis. So things are taking a bit longer than we might have hoped, but we're committed to really supporting 5 languages: English, Spanish, Portuguese, German, and Russian. And additional languages, we look to partners to support, you know. So if we have a Turkish partner who wants the material in Turkish, or a Polish partner who wants it in Polish, we kind of expect them to do that. But these 5 languages of English, Spanish, Portuguese, German, and Russian, we're going to be taking more control of that. We have pretty good partners in the German-speaking region already. So we don't have to do a lot there, but with Spanish and Portuguese particularly, we would like to be controlling the material so that we can really control the translation and the quality. In the Brazilian market, we've started to see 2, 3, 4 different translations of our stuff appearing, and they're all a little different. we want to avoid that same thing happening in the Latino market with the Spanish speakers.
Hi, David. This is Korkutai. I just have a question. We are using also Kanban for a transformation project in one of our clients. So we are also using Kanban in different levels of organizations for different teams. And my question is, what do you think we have in Lean Kanban University? There are lots of there are Kanban maturity model, enterprise level planning, and also I mean, there are different kinds of frameworks and models. What do you think the relationship between them, and what do I have to know to hold it, scale the Kanban in all levels of a company or organization, and what do I have to know about enterprise level planning, maturity model, or other kind of stuff you are currently having in your framework?
So, I don't think that it's a question of there's some threshold level of stuff you have to know. It's just a question of fidelity. How much do you want to know? And the more you put into it, the more you're going to get out of it as an organization. But you can take the basic Kanban stuff and you can scale it out in a service-oriented fashion. You can have lots of service delivery Kanban going on, and you'll get a certain benefit from that in terms of delivery, predictability, that kind of thing. But if you want to leverage the real economic benefits, then you need to get smarter at what you put through those systems and the timing of things, the scheduling, the selecting work. And stuff that we currently package in our ESP class or ESP material, that's really helpful there. But we are working on something called Kanban for Discovery and Innovation, an upstream Kanban class for the equivalent of the KSI class, the KMP2 level class. So people who take the KMP1 class can then opt to have the delivery side or the discovery side, the downstream or the upstream side of KMP2. And we'll be announcing that in the next few weeks, and it'll be available in July. So quite a lot of material that used to only be available through enterprise services planning will show up in that class. The Kanban maturity model, I think, is very important for what you've talked about and the scale that you're talking about. And something we've done with the 1.2 release of Kanban maturity model is we've removed all the project, program, and portfolio management practices. So there's no portfolio Kanban in the new Kanban maturity model. Instead, we're separating all of that out. Theodora and I will work on this. Hopefully it's not a huge project, so we should have it finished by the end of summer, I hope. And we'll publish a separate extension for the KMM for project, program, and portfolio. So in terms of what you would need to have a massive impact on your organization, if I look 6 months from now, what we'll be teaching in basic KMP 1 and 2, so the KSD class and either KSI or KDI, the KMM material, and you need a few coaches, a few people who actually know how to navigate the territory, so the KCP material. That's enough to have a massive impact at a scale of thousands of people. And by massive impact, I mean that you should be able to achieve like 8-fold productivity improvements, lead times reduced by more than 90%, the value you're pumping through the system to rise dramatically at that kind of scale. Like if you do it properly, it should be off the scale in terms of the economic improvement that's possible.
Just one additional question, David. Thanks. What do you think? You mentioned projects, portfolio, and program as a scaling method. So, you know, as SAFe and other methods like flight levels are already using kind of things which are also profiting from the Kanban model which you are actually developing. So, what do you think about them? They're already having some kind of Kanban inside their methods. So what you are currently developing is something similar, or is it more mature, or?
Yeah, I'm sure you know more about these things than I do. My observation from where I'm sitting is they're pretty prescriptive. Make your organization fit our prescription. And our approach is not like that. Just while we have to recognize that the world is organized in projects and programs and portfolios, and there will be places for all of that makes sense, I'm really trying to encourage a much more service-oriented approach. And I think that given the new socially isolated work-from-home world, the idea that you can view your organization as a network of services and rapidly orchestrate and compose those services to do new and interesting things, that's way more powerful. So there are things that we have in the Kanban literature which are more adapting to historical patterns. And there are things that are much more leading and indicative of where we would like organizations to go and how we would like them to change and evolve. So our project, program, portfolio Kanban is more oriented to the first of those two, to fitting Kanban into your existing environment and adapting that way rather than providing real leadership and change. Also, the scope of what we're doing, it's for all professional services and knowledge work. So we have geologists at oil companies doing exploration for new oil fields. We have architecture firms and civil engineering firms and advertising agencies, marketing departments, sales departments, HR departments, including the HR generalists and the recruitment people, finance departments. We have entire medium-sized companies running on Kanban in every department. And I don't think that SAFe or what Klaus is doing with flight levels is oriented in that way. They're very IT-centric things. And, you know, the IT market's a big market, but I don't want to limit myself to what we're just to that. I don't want to be specializing in IT or software development.
Thank you, David.
It's just about dinner time here in Spain, and the thunder is beginning to rumble outside my window. Maybe one more question. Anyone else?
I have one more question. I think so that you was not expecting this kind of question. Do you see possibility to implement Kanban in education? I mean, high school, primary school, and any places.
In terms of the Kanban method, so first of all, you'd have to ask the question, who is the customer? What are their expectations? What needs to be improved? So in education, that's not always obvious. But would there be pockets of adoption of Kanban in the education sector, in schools, universities? I would think so. I can't see why not. And I wrote about this a very long time ago when my younger daughter was just about 3 and she was attending a preschool. And they were actually using a Kanban system for what they called free play. And it was 2 hours a day, 2 separate hours. But while the kids were basically self-organizing to play on different equipment in the preschool, so that the teachers could do other stuff and didn't have to spend a lot of time with the kids for these 2 hours in the day. And it worked where they had this board, this sort of Velcro board, and they had photographs of all the different play equipment, the train table and the teepee and the sandbox and different things. And then they had a number of basically Kanban Velcros. So if they had decided that only 2 kids could play on the train table, there was 2 Velcros beside the photograph of the train table. And then the kids all had photographs of themselves with Velcro on the back. And they had learned that they had to go up to the board, pick up their own photograph and stick it beside the play equipment they wanted to play with. And then they could go off and play with the other kids at that piece of equipment. And if they wanted to switch, they were free to switch at any time because it was free play, but they had to go back to the board, take their photograph off and move it to another free place. And if they couldn't stick it on, they weren't allowed to go play with it. It was essentially a Kanban system in use in a preschool in order to empower the kids to choose their own play equipment, but to avoid overburdening that play equipment and to avoid the emotional impact that would have on kids who might start fighting over the scarce resources. And all of that to enable the managers, the teachers at the preschool, to go off and do other managerial activities while the workers, the kids, were self-organizing and empowered to do their own thing. Fascinating stuff. Now, if you can do that in a preschool with 3-year-olds, why couldn't you do it in an elementary school or middle school, high school? I'm not an expert on education, but have I seen Kanban systems in use in schools? Yes. The Kanban method, it's an evolutionary change and improvement method. So you have to start with the question, what is it you're trying to improve? And I'm not an educationalist, so I wouldn't know.
Thank you so much. My question was based because I work on the Warsaw University of Technology, both are based in Warsaw. And somehow I felt the inspiration to put more Agile and more Kanban. Thank you so much again.
Pleasure. All right, there's still 34 of you who've been here for 2 hours. Thank you all very much for your time.
So I must tell you, David, that the pleasure is on our side. So
yeah, I hope you all enjoy your weekend.
So imagine that, David. But during this meeting, some of my friends write me down and call you Agile Superstar. So it means something.
Well, that's very kind of whoever that was. Thank you very much.
Yes. So there are not many people like you that has so strong impact on Agile world. So we are really grateful, but you were so kind to honor us with your presence. So thank you again very much.
My pleasure. Yeah, everyone have a good weekend.
Same for you, David. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you very much.
Jacob does have the PDF, so I'm sure he can share that with you.
Great.
Yes, I will share the materials with you. I will put it everywhere where I can. To Meetup, to LinkedIn, and maybe somewhere else.
Okay. Thank you. I'll go make my dinner now.
Hello, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Dzięki, Kuba.
Dzięki. Fajnie, że wpadliście.
No, dzięki za organizację. Bardzo fajne spotkanie.
Kurczę, stresowałem się, powiem szczerze, jak miałem coś mu powiedzieć. To jest jednak... Onieśmielił mnie, to mi się rzadko zdarza, szczerze mówiąc. Więc no mam nadzieję, że jeszcze uda mi się kogoś tego kalibru zaprosić. No jest jeden sposób, żeby się przekonać. Myślę, że w weekend albo w poniedziałek zacznę pisać do jakichś tam innych. Nie? Dobra, to co? To miłego weekendu. Trzymajcie się.
Dzięki, miłego weekendu, cześć.
Dzięki.